We did distance on the coordinate plane. It was over on the left, but we're going to ignore the stuff on the left today. Okay, this is the only time anything will be there. So you already wrote this. Don't write this. Okay, just ignore that. So the right-hand side is where everything's going to be. So on the front, the title, this is going to be midpoint on the coordinate plane. Okay, so write that. Ignore everything on the left-hand side. So I have this piece of rope here. If I want to find the midpoint of this piece of rope, what could I do? Okay, so I can fold it. I could bring the ends together, right? And then divide it in half. And then is this right here the midpoint? Yes. So see how I have this segment, right? This is a segment. I bring the end points together, and then I divide it in half. So if this is a number line, and this is at 3 on the number line, and this is at 7 on the number line, I'm going to bring these together. 3 and 7 together give me 10. I divide it in half, and then I get 5. So 3 was over here. This is 5, right? And then this is 7. You see how that works? Okay? So all I'm literally doing is adding the endpoints together and dividing by 2. Make sense? It's like an average. Now, if it was on the coordinate plane, if it's two-dimensional, I'm still going to bring the 2 ends together and then divide it in half. But this time I have 2 coordinates. I have an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate, right? So when I add them together, and bring these together, I add the 2 x-coordinates together, I add the 2 y-coordinates together, and I divide them in half. But I never mix x and y. Okay? Because my answer still has to be an ordered pair. If this is an ordered pair and this is an ordered pair, then the midpoint that's right here has to be an ordered pair. Does that make sense? So all I'm doing is averaging the endpoints, basically. That's adding them together and dividing by 2. You with me? That's what the midpoint formula is. That's all it is. So we are going to write the rest of the front today. So this is what the midpoint formula looks like. There's not an equal sign in here. It's just it's a point. So you have M, which is the name of the midpoint. And then this is an ordered pair. So x1 plus x2, that's the 2x values from the endpoints, divided by 2. And then y1 plus y2, that's the 2 y values. You add those together and divide them by 2. Your answer is always an ordered pair. And this is probably the first formula type thing that you've had where it is an ordered pair, and so it's kind of weird and you feel like maybe you're not done. When you get the x and the y value that goes in there, don't go and try and do something weird with it just because you feel like you got to get x equals 5 in the end, because that doesn't make any sense. You are looking for a midpoint, so it is a point that requires coordinates. Okay? So answers are always ordered pairs. Always ordered pairs. Okay, good. Now you can open this up. Once you finish writing that, go ahead and open it up. And we're going to start in the top left box like we did yesterday, even though it's going to be on the top right on here because we've already filled it in. I need to fix this, and I just haven't because I don't use PowerPoint so much. All right, so on your top left box, even though this is in the top right, I want you to write this. So let's find the midpoint, blah, 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 write all that down. Okay, does anybody see anything wrong with what I have written down? What? Exactly. That says find the midpoint of the length of line segment AB. Does that make any sense? Can you find the midpoint of a length? No. So how do I fix this to make it make sense? Put the line segment above it. Okay. So this is one of those times where the first time I did this, I actually left it off, or I don't know. I think I was going to go back and put it, and I didn't. But either way, it wasn't there. But it's just led to a good teaching moment. So when I added it separate because that's why it's important for you to be able to read it and know what it says and be able to write it correctly. I can find the midpoint of a line segment, right? I just can't find the midpoint of a length. That doesn't make any sense. Okay. All right, so here are my ordered pairs. So we're going to start off with little x and y axis. We're going to ballpark the points just like we did yesterday. It's not a perfect graph. It's all good. So we just kind of put them here. Oops. So these quick, because remember, they're quick little sketches. So don't be like, oh my God, I got to draw the picture. It should take you like 5 seconds max, right? If it's taking you longer than that, you're trying to make them look too pretty, and it's just not necessary. When I'm done, I know that whatever my answer is, it has to be in what quadrant? Yeah, they have numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's a C shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if that entire segment is in the 4th quadrant, then the midpoint has to be in the 4th quadrant, right? And I'm not using my graph to pull my answer off or anything like that, but that just gives me a reasonable answer. So I know when I'm done, my x value is positive, my y value is negative. If I get positive, I went wrong somewhere. Maybe the whole thing is wrong. Maybe I just forgot a sign. Who knows? But thinking about reasonableness of an answer is important. Okay, we talk about that a lot because there's some times where you get weird answers and it's hard for you to know if it's reasonable because it's just stuff you're kind of uncomfortable with. But it's important in the end to think about whether or not you have a reasonable answer. One of my favorite examples is a problem I used to use on an assignment that it was like a similarity thing or whatever, but it asked you for, in the end, you were supposed to find the height of the Titanic. You know, the big ship that sank back in the early 1900s, okay? So a lot of people got the same wrong answer, and the answer was 9 feet, okay? And 9 feet, okay? I understand maybe you've never seen a giant cruise ship, okay? Whatever. But these ceilings are at least 10 feet tall. So do you really think some giant ship that housed all those people could possibly be 9 feet tall? Like, that makes no sense at all, right? So maybe still they wouldn't have known how to find the right answer, but at the very least, you know, what you have doesn't make any sense. So go back and revisit it, and maybe we can figure out what to do. So you always want to ask yourself, is what I have even make any sense before you move on? Because sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it does, and you're still wrong, but, you know, at least it's something. Okay, so then, just like everything else, you're going to write down the formula. Now, we're going to use the whole left side of what you have for this one example, so you have, like, tons of room to write. You don't have to use up the whole left side, but you have it. So we're going to write down our formula. Yeah, the whole left. Like, you can use the whole left side for this one. Like, basically both of these boxes are going to be just one example. Yeah, because the right-hand side, we're going to use it for something else. So just keep going. Okay. I'm just basically saying you can pretend like that line isn't even there. You can just keep going. So you don't have to cram it all in that one box. All right. So then, just like yesterday, maybe you want to label your points x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm not going to make you do that. But there were quite a few people yesterday that didn't do that, and then they plugged their numbers in wrong. And then I'm just like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I told you how to avoid that. And you know whether you need to do that or not, right? I mean, you should know yourself well enough by now if you know if you need to do things like that if you're going to make those careless errors. We're all capable of them. And some of you don't think necessarily that you're going to make the errors, but you do it anyway to be careful, and that's a good thing. Okay. All right, so then we just replace them. I mean, this is fairly straightforward. x1 plus x2, so it's just 2 plus 3, and then y1 plus y2, negative 8 plus a negative 2 over 2. Okay? So all I did was substitute the x1s, y1s. Yes, sir. Yeah, there should be little plastic ones back there on the back counter where my pencils are. Mm-hmm. All right, so then we simplify. Negative 2 plus 3, I'm sorry, not negative 2. 2 plus 3 gives me 5, so I got 5 over 2. Negative 8 plus negative 2 is negative 10, so I got negative 10 over 2. The 5 over 2, can I reduce that? No. The negative 10 over 2, can I reduce that? Yes. What does it reduce to? Negative 5. Okay, negative 5. Negative 8 plus negative 2 is negative 10, so it gives me a negative 5 there. So that's my midpoint. Notice how I left it in the ordered pair the whole time, and it's just an ordered pair in the end. Don't do something weird to try and combine it, because your answer's supposed to be an ordered pair. Now, we look at what we have to see if it's reasonable. I mean, I do have positive negative, which is what I knew I should have. 5 halves is 2.5 when you think about the actual value, so you can go find it on the graph. So if I go over 2.5 and then negative 5, I'm good, right? If I went over like 5 and then negative 12, then I would realize something's not right, okay? We're good? Any questions? Easy enough? Okay, good. So now, even if you didn't take up the whole left side, that's fine. But you need to move to the right side because you're going to need more room than we did. So we're going to go move to the right side of your paper, and we're going to use both of those boxes for the next example. Okay. So I want you to write this down. Anything wrong with that? I left the line segment off. Okay, so once you've written it down, and if I know those of you in the back, this writing isn't that big. The points are -3, 4, and -1/2, 1. So we're going to draw, write your formula, draw your little X and Y axis, plot the points. Now, this has mixed numbers in it. And I told you, no mixed numbers, but you can't control what's been given to you. But if you're given a mixed number, the first thing you should do is change it to an improper fraction, because some of you aren't going to handle your mixed numbers correctly, and you want to make sure that you don't get that wrong. Okay. All right, so on this one, what quadrant, I'm supposed to find C. What quadrant do you think point C is going to be in? 2. Okay. Raise your hand if you're thinking quadrant 2. Okay. All right. Anybody think anything other than 2? Nobody? So what if I told you the answer is in 2? Huh? Oh yeah, I did. I know how to count my quadrants. My answer, but it is not in quadrant 2. You're shaking your head. Do you know why? Exactly. It's asking for point C. It's not asking for this point. And if all you do is take those numbers and plug them into the midpoint formula, you're going to be wrong. Nobody asked you for the midpoint. They gave you the midpoint, right? So it tells you, it says B is the midpoint. This is B. This is the midpoint. So this is one endpoint. That's the midpoint. So the other endpoint's over here somewhere. Does that make sense? Now, do you know exactly where the midpoint is? No. Not yet, you don't. If you did, I wouldn't be asking you this question. You know, do you know, what did I say? Did I say, do I know where the midpoint is? So I'm sorry, thank you. Do you know where the midpoint is? Yes, good answer. We do know where the midpoint is. Do you know exactly where point C is what I'm going to say. No, but you know it has to be over here somewhere, right? Like it has to be about that much away. So we're going to ballpark it, right? Because you don't know exactly, your graph isn't even to scale, right? But you know, in general, it should be about the same distance away, and they should be collinear. So right about, there. It's just ballparking it. So that you have that's a reasonable place for it, right? So you can see if when you're done and the answer you get, does it make sense and is it reasonable? Could you be off a little? Absolutely, but that's okay. We're not just pulling our answer off. All right. Could I use the distance formula to get my answer? Because somebody asked me that last period. No. I can use, whatever this length is, I know that this is the same length, but it doesn't give me a location, right? So let's say that the distance was 5. It's not, but let's just say this distance is 5. That means C is 5 units away here. But it could be 5 units away anywhere. It's like a circle, right? I don't know 5 units away where, because it doesn't give me the location. So the distance formula isn't going to help me any. But I can use the midpoint formula. When you do the midpoint formula, you have this, right? There's no equal sign there. And I want to make sure that you understand this. So let me erase this because I already put it up there. If I have AB, you don't have to write this down anywhere, but if I have AB equals -5, 7, right? So if I just write that down. What does A equal? -5. What does B equal? 7. Because this X value matches this one and this one matches this one. We all agree with that? That's the concept that we're about to use here. So we're going to plug stuff in. I'm going to substitute it in. I know the midpoint. Whatever you put in here is going to be equal to the midpoint. So the midpoint is equal to this. So let's say that we don't know what this point is. I'm going to call it XY. Right? It's just XY because I don't know what it is. So the ordered pair for this point is XY. The ordered pair for this point is -3, 4. So when I add my x's, it's going to be x plus a -3 and y plus 4 because I don't know the other one. Does that make sense to you? I'm not using this number. This is my answer that they already gave me. So it looks like this. This is my midpoint. That's equal to the x's of the endpoints added together, divided by 2, and then the y's. So write all that down. Make sure you agree with and understand where it's coming from. And you can pretend like the line underneath there doesn't even exist, and you can just keep writing down because it's going to take up both boxes. Any questions about where any of that came from? Right. Well, I'm pretty confident my y is negative. Whether or not my x is negative, not real sure, because maybe it's actually in quadrant 3 and not in quadrant 4, because since I'm kind of guessing. But I'm pretty confident that that y has to be negative. But again, even somebody last period said, couldn't it still be in quadrant 2? Like if your picture is real bad? Yeah, I mean, your picture might be kind of off, but you don't know exactly. But yes, I know my x is going to be small, right? My x is small. Maybe it's positive, maybe it's negative. Pretty confident my y is negative. Okay. Right, just because we're just not sure yet. So we'll just kind of go with that. Okay, we good with that? In the end, when you get your answer, then we're going to look and see if it's reasonable, and that'll help a little bit more that way. All right, so any questions? Everybody understand where all that stuff came from, right? Now, because of what we just said here, right, I'm going to use this concept. This x value equals this x value, right? Because I don't mix x and y. This x value is -3/2. This x value is x plus -3/2, right? So I'm going to take both of the x values out and set them equal to each other, just like I did on the other page. So it looks like this. Okay? You have a question? Where to get the 1 from? Because this is the order, this is the midpoint. So this is the midpoint. That's your answer. So it's this order pair right here. Yeah, remember, this right, the formula equals the midpoint. They gave me the midpoint. That's where that came from right there. Okay? So that's x equals x is what I put right here. Everybody good with that? Okay, so I need to solve for x. What could be the first thing I do to make my life a little easier? Multiply both sides by 2. Like, I can't start by getting rid of that 3. I got to start with the 2. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. These little asterisks mean multiply is the best I could do with what was in PowerPoint. Just kind of show what I was doing. I could have done it with parentheses or something. I just didn't. So what happens with the 2's on the left? They cancel out. What happens with the 2's on the right? They cancel out. I don't distribute that. That's the whole point of why I did what I did. So I get -3 equals x plus -3. So what does x equal? 0. Everybody okay with that? So now do the same thing, but with, yeah, go ahead. Well, I didn't multiply the denominator. I multiplied the whole thing, but it's like 2 over 1, and they just cancel out. Fraction rules. Okay, go Google them if you're having trouble. Yes? Okay, the answer, well, if x equals 0, is the answer on the x-axis? It's on the y-axis. Yeah. So it's, my x isn't positive or negative, it happens to be 0, right? Which I was pretty close to 0, but I was just eyeballing it anyway, right? And again, I could have been wrong the other way. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing for the y's. So the y value of the midpoint, which is 1, equals the y value that I have in my midpoint formula like that. So then again, I want to get rid of the denominator, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. This time nothing cancels out on the left, so I have to actually multiply 2 times 1. They just cancel out on the right. So 2 equals y plus 4. So what does y equal? -2. Now, your answers are always ordered pairs. That's what we wrote on the front, right? And I'm looking for point C. So this is called point C, so I need to write it like an ordered pair. So C is at 0, -2. Somebody earlier asked me, should it be C equals 0, -2? Okay, and this is how I answered her. And I want you to hear how I answered her, because I didn't just say yes or no, because I rarely just tell you yes or no. I answer it with questions. Okay, and that is not to make you feel stupid. The point is not saying, well, you should have already known this and you shouldn't have asked me, but I'm trying to show you that you actually know the answers to most of the questions that you ask me. And so when you're sitting at home and you don't have anybody to ask, if you start thinking through the way I'm trying to get you to think through things, you'll realize that a lot of times you can come up with those answers. So she asked me that. I said, okay, well, can a point, the capital C represents the name of the point, right? Yes. So can a point ever actually equal anything? That's a picture. Can a picture equal a number? No, it can't, right? So since you know a picture can't equal a number, then does it make any sense to say that C equals an ordered pair? No, it doesn't, right? And so I wanted to make sure that she understood and everybody else understood. I didn't ask it that way to say, well, duh, you should know that you can't make a point equal a number. But that's kind of how you can think through things when you're not sure, okay? Because most of the time, you know way more than you think you do. And most of the time, you know the answers to the questions that you're asking. You just don't know how to dig them out of the little filing cabinets in your brain yet. Okay, so it's just me helping you. Don't get frustrated when you come in for tutorials and you're asking questions and I don't just tell you, this is what you do. That doesn't help you. I'm not doing that to be mean. I'm doing that to help you, even though you don't realize it, and then you get frustrated. And I know you get frustrated. But I'm going to ask you questions and make you figure it out along. I will help you. I will guide you through it, but I'm not just going to sit down and do it for you, because you're not going to learn that way. You with me? So when you start to get frustrated, don't get too frustrated. I'm not doing it to be mean or just not to help you. Okay, so that's my answer. And now let's look at where we graph it. If I'm going to plot 0, -2, 0, -2, well, since that was 1, I'd say that should probably be a little bit lower, but I was guessing anyway. Am I pretty darn close? Yes, and since that was a guess anyway, at least it's reasonable, right? If it was 0, -30, I'm thinking something isn't right, okay? Or if it was 5, -7, I don't know. I mean, maybe my picture's way off. Maybe I need to revisit it, but, at least that gives you, hey, I think that's a reasonable answer. I think we're good, okay? Any questions about that? Okay, so do you see how you can help yourself with the reasonableness with just minor things? It's not, I know that you were taught to kind of check yourself on some things in algebra, and sometimes the checking process took longer than the solving process. But that isn't necessarily always the case, and it's good to check yourself to make sure that you feel like you're on the right track. Questions? We good? All right. So you can go ahead and glue this in.